Good evening, children. So the topic for today is what I have decided is we'll be moving to the third chapter, that is forest, society and colonialism. Now, in this chapter, several points are there, but in short, we'll be doing this. My first point is, which is related to beginning of deforestation. Now, in the 17th century, demand for food grains went up due to the growth of population. Farmers began clearing forests to cultivate the land. British encouraged the growth of commercial crops like jute, cotton, wheat and sugar. Remember the point? British encouraged the growth of commercial crops like jute, cotton, wheat and sugar. Now the next point is, in the 19th century, demand for these crops increased. British thought that these forests were unproductive and wanted to bring more land under cultivation. Now the target of the Britishers was that they wanted to earn profit, and the Britishers realized that instead of having these forests, these forests are unproductive, so we should cut all these forests and we should bring this land under cultivation. So that was the phenomena. Now, oak forests in England started disappearing. Oak forests in England started disappearing. This created a problem of timber supply for the Royal Navy. Rail network was essential for the movement of imperial troops in India, and at that time the Britishers were ruling in India, and for the transportation or for the movement of the Britishers, this rail network was very essential. The forests were cleared and land was given to Europeans for plantation of tea and coffee. Remember this point? The forests were cleared and land was given to Europeans for plantation of tea and coffee. Next point, German expert Dietrich Brandis was called to advise on reckless falling of trees. He was made the first Inspector General of Forest. He set up the Indian Forest Services in 1864 and helped formulate the Indian Forest Act of 1865. The Forest Act was amended twice. Two times there was a change in the Forest Act. Once in the year 1878 and then it was made in the year 1972. This act divided forest into three categories. According to this, the forest was divided into three parts or three categories. The three types were reserved, protected and village forests. The villagers could not take anything from the reserved forest. The biggest problem was that the villagers could not take anything from reserved forests, while they could take wood for building houses or for fuel from protected or village forests. So enough foundations were made on the villagers. Imperial Forest Research Institute in Dehradun was set up in 1906. In Dehradun, Imperial Forest Research Institute was set up in 1906, where scientific forestry was taught. The natural forests having different types of trees were cut down, and instead one type of trees were planted in straight rows. The change was that one type of trees were planted and all the trees were in straight rows. The forest department wanted trees which were suitable for building ships or railways. They needed trees that could provide hardwood and were tall and straight. Particular species like sal and teak were promoted and others were cut. Especially more and more importance was given to sal and teak and others were chopped off. Villagers wanted a forest with a mixture of species to satisfy different needs such as fuel, fodder and leaves. Hunting was totally restricted. People were not allowed to trade in forest products anymore. Only Europeans were given this right. Means these rights were taken from the Indians and they were handed over to the Europeans. Shifting cultivation or Sweden agriculture. Shifting cultivation or Sweden agriculture, in which part of forests are cut and burnt in rotation, was practiced in India. Europeans were against this practice as they believed it could harm valuable timber and also made calculation of taxes. Others were displaced without any notice or compensation. Reservation combined with famines during 1899 and 1900 and 1907-1908. It led to rebellion. Gundadhur was their leader. In 1916, mango bogs, a lump of earth, chilies and arrows began circulating between villages. These were actually messages inviting people to rebel against the British, or in other words, I say that from the Bastar, the revolts or the rebellions were practicing. Next point is effect of colonialism in Java. Like the Britain, the Dutch imposed forest rules in Java and restricted usage of forest. In 1890, Surontiko Samin began questioning the state ownership of forest, which soon developed into a widespread movement. Saminists lay down on their land when the Dutch came to survey it and refused to pay taxes or do labor. Now, on the other side, there was an impact of the World War also. Effect of World Wars. In India, working plants were abandoned and forests were cut freely by the British. In Java, the Dutch followed scorched earth policy and burnt everything to prevent resources from falling in the hands of Japanese. Now the other word is effect on pastoralists. Wasteland rules were enacted. Uncultivated land was taken over and given to selected individuals. Such grounds were usually grazing tracts for pastoralists. The movement of pastoralists was restricted. The grazing grounds shrank. What was the condition of the grazing grounds? They were totally shrank. They started shrinking. The taxes were increased. The pastoralists had to pay tax on every animal they grazed. This led to a decrease in agricultural stock. The trade and craft were equally affected. Now the loss was on both the fields. It was on trade also, craft also, and even on agriculture. Now let's move to Criminal Tribes Act. The British wanted to rule over settled population as it was easier to identify and control such population. In 1871, Criminal Tribes Act was passed, which declared many communities of traders, craftsmen and pastoralists and criminals by birth and by nature. These communities were expected to live in notified village settlements and had to acquire a permit to move out. If they are thinking of changing their location, then they were supposed to take a permission. Then only it was acceptable. Now, there was an effect in Africa also due to this pastoralists. There was an effect on pastoralists of Africa. Maasai lost 60% of their pre-colonial grounds. Pastoralists were not allowed to move out with their stock without permit. Means without permission they cannot move. Grazing grounds were taken over by European powers, and in Africa the entire grazing areas were taken by the European powers. It was not only France, it was not only England, there were other nations also. Enclosures in England. Before late 18th century, the English countryside had open fields. There were no partitions or privately enclosed lands. All villagers had access to the commons. With the increase in price of wool in the 16th century, there was a sudden incline in the rate of wool. Rich farmers wanted to expand their wool production, improve the quality of their sheep breeds, so they began enclosing common lands. Up till mid-18th century, these enclosures were not supported by the state. After mid-18th century, this enclosure movement spread rapidly. This severely affected the poor as they were dependent on the common land for their daily needs. It was good for the owners but harmful for those were dependent on these. Next point is Enclosures Act. Okay, during that period only there was a population explosion in England in the 18th century led to increase in demand for grains. With the advent of industrialization, more and more people moved to urban areas. Now in the cities only the factories or the industries were opening. So now the people shifted from village or the remote areas to the urban areas, and the urban areas became overpopulated. Thus, market for food grains expanded and food grain prices rose. Since England was at war with France, grains could not be imported. This encouraged farmers to enclose their lands and increase production. They pressurized the government to pass the Enclosure Act. Due to the pressure of the rich owners, the Enclosure Act was passed. Next point is breadbasket of the world. United States. Till 1780s, till the year 1780s, white American settlements were confined to narrow eastern coast, and in the beginning of the 20th century they started moving westwards and started clearing land for corn and wheat cultivation. Food grains were exported to feed Europe. Mechanical reaper was invented to bring more and more land under cultivation. Post-war, in the 1920s, the demand reduced dramatically. Export markets collapsed and stocks piled up. Black blizzards, dust storms came in American plains in 1930s, causing huge losses to life and property. And the one point is opium production in India. Remember the word opium. Opium could only be cultivated on well-manured good land. Peasants usually grew pulses on this land. Unwilling cultivators were made to produce opium. It means here that the Britishers were pressurizing the Indians to have this cash crop, and unwillingly also the farmers were cultivating or they were forced to cultivate or produce opium by the system of advances. By 1773, government of Bengal had established monopoly. This Bengal government, or the Britishers were there at the time, the government of Bengal had established a complete monopoly, means one man or one nation show in the trade of opium. Now, apart from this agriculture or deforestation, there was a loss in the field of cricket also. Effect of colonialism on cricket. By the 17th century, cricket evolved enough to be recognizable as a distinct game, and it was popular enough for its fans to be fined for playing on Sunday. The first written laws of cricket were drawn up in 1744. Remember the date? The laws of cricket were made or drawn up in the year 1744. The world's first cricket club was formed in Hambledon in 1760s, and the Marylebone Cricket Club was founded in 1787. In 1788, MCC published its first revision of the laws and became the guardian of cricket regulations. The first Indian cricket club, remember this point, the first Indian club, the Calcutta Cricket Club, was established in 1792. It means that in India, the cricket started from Bengal or Calcutta. The rich who could afford to play it for pleasure were called amateurs, and the poor who played it for living were called professionals. Means the rich people were playing only for pleasure, and they were known as amateurs, and the poor, they were playing it for their livelihood, and they were known as professionals. The rich considered the sport a kind of leisure. The wages of professionals were paid by the patronage or subscription or gate money. The origin of Indian cricket. Remember the point? The origin of Indian cricket is found in Bombay, and the first Indian community to start playing the game was the small community of Zoroastrians. Zoroastrian means the Parsi. The Parsis. The Parsis founded the first Indian cricket club, and the name was Oriental Cricket Club in Bombay in the year 1848. The cricket club was founded in the year 1848. Okay, so children, today it might be that there would be a network issue is for all. So now let's move to the questions. Most of the topics I have covered. I am having more points to tell you, but due to shortage of time, I'm just coming to the questions fast. And the questions are: okay, till the time I'm just putting the question, and my first question is, which of the following was not the reason for deforestation under British rule in India? Point A, building ships for Royal Navy. Option B, giving cleared land to Europeans for jute plantation. Option C, laying down railway line sleepers. And option 4, running locomotives. Four options I've kept in front of you. You are supposed to give the answer. Archika has given the answer very fast. Good one. All the children give the answer fast. Okay. And remember this point, it was not for jute plantations. It was meant only for the plantation of tea and coffee. Now the next question, my next question is which one of the following statement is not true about scientific forestry? See the second question, all of you, and then tell me the answer. One child has sent me the answer. Anirudh Dwivedi. Correct answer. Now what's the correct answer for this question? Okay, I'm just trying to zoom the questions. Now the questions are clear. Okay. Yes, correct answer. Okay, the options are, the first option is for question number 2. The first option, the first Inspector General of Forest in India was a Dutch expert, Dietrich Brandis. Other option, Forest Service was started in 1862. Option C, Imperial Forest Institute was set up in Dehradun in 1906. And the next one is, in scientific forestry, mixed trees were planted in straight rows. What's the answer? Okay, yes, all the children have sent me the answer. The correct answer is option 3 or option C. And the reason for this answer is the first Inspector General of Forest in India was a German and not a Dutch. Expert Dietrich Brandis Indian Forest Service was started in 1864. Now the third question. My third question is, under the Forest Act, from which type of forests wood could not be taken for building houses? Option 1, reserved forest. Option 2, protected forest. Option 3, village forest. And option D or 4, all of these. Now what's the answer for this question? Think and then speak the answer. Okay, children, I am coming to the answer. The answer is, third answer is option 1. The best forests were called reserved forests. Villagers could not take anything from these forests, even for their own use. For house building or fuel, they could not take wood from protected or village forests. The correct option. Okay, now see the fourth question, children. I hope so the fourth question is visible to all. My fourth question is, which of the following statement, fourth question is, which of the following statement is true regarding the restriction on forest usage in Java in late 19th century? Option A, Surantico Samin began questioning private ownership of the forest. Option 2, Saminists lay down on the land when French came to survey it. Option 3, Saminists refused to pay taxes or perform labor. And option 4, both 1 and 2 are true. Now tell me the answer. Okay, children, 4. Just think, option 3 and 4. Okay. Okay, children, for this, okay, now let's move to the other question. My other question is, which of the following is not a consequence of the restrictions imposed by the British? Just listen to the question, you can type it. Which one of the following is not a consequence of the restrictions imposed by the British on the pastoralists in India? Option 1, pastoralists had to pay tax on every animal they grazed. Option 2, their agriculture stock declined. Option 3, the trade and craft of the pastoralists declined. And option 4, the pastoralists were now allowed to enter the reserved forest. So the answer for this question is option 4. No pastoralist was allowed to access to reserved forests. In protected forests, some customary grazing rights of pastoralists were granted, but their movements were severely restricted. Okay, the fifth answer was correct. So children, for today this much only.